The intuition trap of time: you think time is obvious because it feels constant and familiar. You wake up, the clock moves forward, your body changes, memories pile up, and plans stretch ahead of you. This daily rhythm creates the comforting illusion that time is something solid, something flowing past you like a river. But that feeling is not evidence. It is habit. It is biology. And mistaking that habit for reality is the first and biggest error people make when they talk about time. The watch on your wrist does not reveal the nature of the universe. It only marks repeating physical processes. Neither does aging prove that time itself is moving. Chemical reactions in your cells change, and you label that sequence with numbers. When people say time passes, they are quietly smuggling in a metaphor that explains nothing. If time were truly flowing, we would have to ask what makes it flow, what direction it chooses, and how fast it moves. Saying 1 second per s-econ sounds sensible, but it collapses into nonsense the moment you examine it. This is where intuition becomes dangerous. Human intuition evolved to keep organisms alive, not to describe reality accurately. Your ancestors did not survive by understanding spacetime. They survived by predicting weather, tracking prey, and sensing danger. Time, as your brain experiences it, is a survival interface. It compresses change into a story you can navigate. That story feels smooth and continuous because smooth stories are useful, not because the universe demands them. Consider how fragile this sense actually is. Moments of fear stretch into eternity. Hours of joy vanish in an instant. Trauma freezes certain memories, while routine days disappear entirely. If time were a stable external substance, your experience of it would not warp so easily. What changes is not time, but the way your brain organizes events. Your mind edits reality constantly, rearranging emphasis, speed, and importance, then presents the result as the passage of time. The river metaphor survives because it feels poetic and because it removes responsibility. If time is carrying you forward, then aging, loss, and death feel imposed from outside. But physics does not grant time that role. Time does not push you. It does not age you. It does not destroy things. Those processes have physical causes. Time is the label you attach afterward to keep score. Once you see this, an uncomfortable possibility emerges. If your most basic sense of time is already a constructed experience, then building an understanding of the universe on top of that intuition is like measuring the ocean with a ruler made of rubber. The confidence you feel about time is not knowledge, it is familiarity, and familiarity is exactly what must be questioned before anything real can be understood. That is why starting with intuition is so misleading. It feels like a foundation, but it is closer to a story your mind tells to stay oriented. The more comfortable the story feels, the harder it is to abandon. Yet every major advance in physics begins by betraying comfort. The moment you stop trusting how time feels is the moment understanding can begin. Without that break, everything that follows remains trapped inside habit and metaphor rather than reality itself, as science painfully learns again and again. While your brain lies about time, your experience of time feels personal, but you assume it is shared. You imagine everyone moving through the same present at the same pace, synchronized by an invisible cosmic clock. That assumption collapses the moment you look closely at how brains actually work. The human mind does not measure time directly. It infers time from change. And that inference depends entirely on internal processes that vary dramatically from person to person. Think about counting seconds in your head. Some people hear numbers ticking like a metronome. Others visualize marks sliding past on an imaginary scale. Both feel natural to the person using them, yet they rely on completely different neural machinery. Interrupt the first person with speech and their timing collapses. Interrupt the second and nothing breaks. If time were something you directly sensed, these differences would not exist. This variation exposes a crucial fact. What you experience as duration is a mental construction layered on top of events. Your brain stitches moments together using memory expectation, and attention then presents the result as a flowing timeline. When attention narrows, time seems slow. When attention scatters, hours vanish. The clock did not change. The universe did not speed up or slow down. Only the pattern inside your head shifted. This is why personal testimony about time is unreliable. Someone in a coma wakes believing no time has passed. A child feels a year stretch endlessly. An adult feels decades compress. These experiences contradict one another, yet each feels true from the inside. Physics cannot be built on feelings that contradict themselves. To study time, physics discards experience and keeps measurement. Measurement requires a physical process, not introspection. A pendulum swings. An atom vibrates. A crystal oscillates. Time is defined by counting those repetitions. Remove the process and the measurement disappears. Without change, time has no meaning. This is not philosophy. It is operational necessity. A second is not an idea. It is an agreed count of motion. This creates a sharp divide between intuition and physics. Intuition treats time as a thing acting on objects. Physics treats time as a bookkeeping system describing relationships between events. When people say time causes aging or decay, they reverse cause and label. Processes happen first. Time is the language used to describe their order. The discomfort you feel here is intentional. Your brain wants time to be concrete because concrete things feel controllable. If time is just a description, not an actor, then the universe feels less personal and less forgiving. That resistance is not evidence against the idea. It is evidence that the idea is pressing against a deep habit of thought. Once you accept that your brain is not a clock, the discussion shifts. Time stops being something you sense and becomes something you infer. That shift is subtle but profound. It clears the path to understanding why physics talks about time so differently from everyday language, and why trusting intuition is the fastest way to get lost. This prepares you for a difficult realization. If your sense of time is constructed, then disagreement about time is inevitable. Two people can hear the same explanation and imagine entirely different internal pictures. Agreement in words hides disagreement in mental models. Physics advances by abandoning those models and replacing them with structures that can be tested, measured, and shared. That discipline feels cold, but it is the only way to move beyond private experience. Understanding time requires letting go of how it feels and learning how it behaves, even when that behavior contradicts everything your intuition insists must be true. Without this separation, every argument about time collapses into personal feeling, and no common ground remains for discovery. That is why physics begins by mistrusting experience and ends by revealing a universe stranger, quieter, and far less human than we expect. This discomfort is the price of understanding. Nothing important comes free, ever. Time in physics is not what you think. Physics begins by refusing to care how time feels. Feelings are inconsistent, private, and impossible to calibrate. Instead, physics asks a colder question: how do we measure time without referring to human experience at all? The answer immediately strips time of its mystery. Time is not a substance, not a force, and not a thing that moves. Time is a method for ordering events using repeatable physical processes. That definition feels disappointing because it removes drama, but disappointment is often the first sign that intuition is being corrected. In physics, time exists only where something changes. A second is not an abstract idea floating through the universe. A second is defined by motion, such as a pendulum swing or an atomic vibration. If nothing changes, there is no operational way to define time at all. This is why physics treats time as relational. It does not exist on its own, waiting for events to happen inside it. It is extracted from the behavior of matter and energy. This perspective kills a powerful but misleading image. Many people imagine time as a container, like an empty box that keeps ticking, even if the universe were completely empty. That view came from classical mechanics, and it worked well enough for everyday problems. But it collapses under careful examination. Remove all motion, all particles, all radiation, and nothing remains that could function as a clock. Without a clock, the word time loses meaning. Physics does not allow definitions that cannot be tested. This is why physicists avoid asking what time really is. That question has no experimental handle. Instead, they ask how time behaves in equations and measurements. When framed this way, time becomes a coordinate, similar to position. It labels where an event sits relative to other events. Saying an event happens earlier or later is no different, structurally, from saying it happens left or right. The difference is psychological, not physical. This reframe is deeply unsettling because it demotes time from actor to accountant. Time does not cause change. It records change. When milk spoils, bacteria and chemistry are responsible. When stars burn out, nuclear reactions do the work. Time does not reach into the universe and push anything forward. It keeps score. Confusing the scorekeeper for the cause is a linguistic mistake that feels natural because language evolved for storytelling, not precision. Once this accounting role is understood, many everyday statements about time reveal themselves as shorthand. Saying time passes is convenient, not accurate. It compresses a description of countless physical processes into a single phrase. Physics expands that phrase back out and examines the machinery underneath. This expansion is where intuition starts to fail, because intuition prefers simple narratives. The strength of the physical definition is not beauty but consistency. It works the same for atoms, planets, and galaxies. It does not care about memory, emotion, or anticipation. It applies even where no observers exist. That indifference is exactly what makes it useful. Physics demands descriptions that do not depend on who is watching or how they feel. This shift explains why physicists sound dismissive when discussing time. They are not denying experience. They are isolating it. Experience is treated as data about brains, not about the universe. Once separated, confusion clears. The universe does not age. Objects change. The universe does not move into the future. Events are ordered. Understanding time this way removes many paradoxes while creating new discomfort. The discomfort comes from losing the idea that time is doing something to you. Physics offers no such comfort. It replaces narrative with structure. That trade feels harsh, but it is necessary. Only by abandoning the urge to humanize time can physics describe a universe that operates whether humans exist or not. This is the point where authority matters. The physical definition of time survives because it works. It predicts outcomes. It aligns experiments across continents and centuries. It does not care whether it feels right. That indifference is its power. Once you accept this, the conversation changes. The question is no longer what time feels like, but how it behaves under extreme conditions. That question leads directly to the moment where time stops being uniform, stops being universal, and starts behaving in ways that intuition never prepared you to accept. How time bends, slows, and breaks everything so far has stripped time of its emotional weight. But now physics delivers the real shock. Even after redefining time as a method of ordering events, most people quietly assume one last comfort, that time ticks the same everywhere. 1 second here, 1 second there. Universal, steady, reliable. This belief feels unavoidable because daily life never challenges it. But the universe does. Relativity shows that time itself does not behave uniformly. It stretches, compresses, and disagrees with itself, depending on motion and gravity. To understand this, physics abandons everyday metaphors and replaces them with geometry. You are not simply sitting in space while time carries you forward. You are moving through space-time, a combined structure where motion through space and motion through time are inseparably linked. You are always moving at a constant total speed through this structure. What changes is how that motion is divided. When you are still relative to your surroundings, almost all of your motion is through time. When you move faster through space, less motion remains available for time. This is not philosophy, it is measurement. Clocks in motion tick more slowly than clocks at rest, not because the clocks malfunction, but because time itself is behaving differently along different paths. A clock on a fast-moving spacecraft does not agree with a clock on Earth. Both are correct. They simply occupy different trajectories through space-time. This destroys the idea of a single universal present. There is no master clock synchronizing the universe. The same distortion appears near massive objects. Gravity does not merely pull on matter, it bends space-time. The closer a clock is to a massive body, the slower it ticks compared to one farther away. A clock on Earth runs more slowly than a clock on a satellite. This effect is small, but it is real. Navigation systems must correct for it continuously. If they did not, modern technology would fail within hours. Time is not abstract here. It is operationally different depending on location. These facts force a painful conclusion. Time is not an invisible background shared by everything. It is local. Each object carries its own measure of time, shaped by motion and gravity. Asking which clock shows the true time becomes meaningless. True compared to what? There is no universal reference left to. This is where intuition collapses completely. Common sense insists that events must happen in a single order for everyone. Relativity denies this. Two observers moving differently can disagree about whether two distant events happen simultaneously. Neither observer is wrong. Simultaneity is not absolute. It depends on how space-time is sliced by motion. The present moment is not a global feature of the universe. It is a local construction. This realization transforms time from a river into a landscape. Events do not flow past you. They exist within a four-dimensional structure. Your experience of flow comes from how your brain traces a path through that structure. Physics does not privilege your path. It describes all paths equally. What feels like movement through time is simply the sequence of events along your world line. Push this idea further, and something remarkable appears. At the extreme limit, for objects moving at the speed of light, time does not pass at all. From the perspective of a photon, emission and absorption occur without duration. There is no aging, no ticking, no interval. This is not because light is special psychologically. It is because space-time geometry leaves no room for time along that path. Relativity replaces comfort with consistency. It does not ask what time should do. It shows what time must do for the equations to hold. The result is unsettling because it removes the last human anchor. Time does not care about you, your memories, or your plans. It responds only to motion, mass, and structure. Once this is understood, many arguments dissolve. There is no single answer to how fast time passes. There is no universal now sweeping across the cosmos. There is no contradiction in clocks disagreeing. The contradiction existed only in intuition, not in reality. This bending and breaking of time is not an optional feature of exotic physics. It is a fundamental property of the universe. Every moment you exist, you are participating in it. You just do so slowly enough that the distortions remain hidden. The universe is not obligated to match your expectations. It only obeys its own structure. And once time becomes part of that structure, rather than a backdrop, the final mystery emerges. Why time seems to move in one direction at all. The arrow of time and the end of before after everything you have just accepted. One mystery remains stubbornly intact. If time does not flow, if it bends and disagrees, if there is no universal present, then why does it feel directional? Why does the past feel fixed while the future feels open? Physics gives an answer that is colder and more unsettling than most people expect. The direction you experience is not built into time itself. It is built into disorder. The laws of physics, at their core, do not care about direction. Most equations work just as well forward as backward. Film a planet orbiting a star and reverse the footage. Nothing looks wrong. But drop an egg on the floor and reverse that film, and the illusion collapses instantly. The difference has nothing to do with time pushing events forward. It has everything to do with probability. There are vastly more ways for things to be disordered than ordered. Systems naturally move from fewer possible arrangements to many possible arrangements. This statistical drift is called entropy. Entropy does not create time. It creates asymmetry. It explains why certain sequences are overwhelmingly likely and others are effectively impossible. You remember the past because it was more ordered. You cannot remember the future because it does not yet exist in a low entropy form that can store information. Memory itself is a physical process that depends on increasing disorder elsewhere. Your brain works because it dissipates energy. The arrow you feel is the arrow of information loss, not a river of time. This insight reshapes the deepest questions. When you ask what happened before the universe began, physics does not give a poetic answer. If time is a way of ordering change inside the universe, then asking about before the universe is like asking what is north of the North Pole. The question assumes a structure that no longer exists. There may be no before at all. The universe might not have emerged into time. Time may have emerged with the universe. This conclusion clashes violently with human psychology. Your mind demands a story with a beginning that sits inside a longer timeline. But physics does not promise narrative satisfaction. It promises coherence. The tape measure does not extend past its zero mark. That is not a failure. It is a boundary. Understanding this does not make daily life impossible. You can still schedule meetings, celebrate birthdays, and measure duration. These tools remain useful. They were never wrong. They were incomplete. What changes is not how you live, but how you interpret what living means inside a universe that does not privilege your perspective. Time is not your enemy and not your guide. It is a description, a map, not a force. The discomfort you feel now is the cost of abandoning intuition in favor of structure. Physics does not replace wonder, it relocates it. The universe becomes less personal, but far more coherent. Once you let go of the need for time to behave the way it feels, confusion gives way to clarity. The universe does not flow. It exists. Events are ordered. Change happens. Entropy increases, and your path through this structure is what you call now. That is not a loss of meaning. It is the deepest correction intuition has ever been forced to accept.